to be here, everybody. Greetings from London. Good afternoon. Good morning to you guys. Thrilled to see so many people here. Thrilled to see some friends here. It's all super exciting. We have just a massive amount of information to cover today in 90 minutes. And so we're going to jump right in. I'm just going to show a little welcome video to get everybody warmed up. Okay, so here and screen. Beautiful.
Greetings from Red Newt Cellars here in the Finger Lakes of New York State.
Welcome to Fox Run. My name is Peter Bell. I've been the winemaker here since 1995.
And our family is really excited because we're celebrating our 60th anniversary.
So if we were to go up as a bird, we are surrounded by water everywhere, and that moderates us, keeps us cooler in the summers and warmer in the winters.
And as a winemaker, it's the exciting thing to be in a young region that's really starting to explode. It's why we see so many colleagues moving here from across the world.
We see the result in our winery of being responsible in the vineyards. So our fermentation, the health of the must and wines are just of higher quality.
People always think that cool climate means that our struggle is ripeness and that we struggle to fully ripen our fruit. And that's absolutely not the case in the Finger Lakes.
A lot of things you can do with this, from cheeses and salads, through grilled foods, it's just a happy wine, and it'll make you and your friends and your family happy when you drink it.
Cheers.
Okay. So lovely little video. I think Gabriella probably recognized one of the views there at the end. You were there with me that day when I filmed that beautiful Long Island Sound. Okay, everyone should be able to see my screen. I'm going to go into full screen mode here. There we go, enter full screen. Lovely. Everyone should have that. Fantastic. So, listen, you said words New York, and most people think of New York City, right? Big dreams, bold attitudes, all that good stuff. But, surprisingly, in as little as an hour drive, I think people forget this, that, the 5 boroughs of concrete jungle give way to nearly 7 million acres of rolling agricultural land and award-winning vineyards. Today's course featuring a flight of 7 wines. We're going to give you a taste of the major regions, grapes, and styles of New York State wine. Okay. Late last night, I changed this. The text in the corner said, if you could make it here, then you could make it anywhere. But I said, I don't like that. I said, so we're going to change it. If you can make it here, then you should, right? Yes, New York State is not the easiest place to make wine, but check in with a winemaker in Burgundy or California, and I bet they will not tell you that their job is easy, but it's worth it, right? And so for New York, we have a special place here, and I think we need to be reminded of that, rather than comparing ourselves to other bigger places with bigger marketing budgets. I think we should really focus on what we have, which is awesome, right? These regions that we have boast unique terroir. They sit at a special intersection of climate and geography. So you've got the little world map on the right-hand side there. You could see that New York State lies well within the world's wine belt, right between 28 and 50 degrees north latitude. On the map, the bodies of water that you see across the state help create the unique geological and climatic influences that combine to form the regions that are well suited for viticulture. This includes the two terminal moraines that form Long Island. Essentially, the spine of Long Island is kind of two masses, and they're well-drained material that really makes the area quite special. You're surrounded by the Atlantic Ocean to the south, and you have the Long Island Sound to the north. The depth of the Hudson River, also quite important, bringing seawater and ocean air up the river valley. And then you have the shaping of the Niagara Escarpment, the Finger Lakes, Lake Champlain, and the Great Lakes Erie and Ontario, all thanks to glaciers. And so these geological features were created roughly 1.6 million years ago. Who says we don't have enough history? The ice age that covered New York and glaciers were a mile thick, and when they retreated about 10,000 years ago, the resulting glacial scouring, meltwater pressure, and glacial deposition gave rise to many of the landscapes that make New York State so ideal for grape growing today. The shale and limestone soils that cover central and western New York come from the ocean floor. Okay, this foundation came up from the surface following a period of erosion about 220 million years ago. And so that's why we're finding fossils in vineyards in central New York, sea fossils. New York can be divided into 13 distinct physiographic provinces and areas. These are areas that have similar parent material and geologic structure. And each of New York's grape growing regions, or AVAs, are encompassed within one of these provinces, with the exception of the Hudson River region, which actually crosses 5. Okay, we've got another slide here. So this map here, it's a very detailed map, and it's quite old, but it's really just plain to see that the rainbow of colors, that the state boasts a very complex tapestry of soil types, particularly in the Champlain Valley, Finger Lakes, and Hudson Valley, all bringing a unique terroir to our wine. Keep going. We are undoubtedly cool climate, but we've proven that we know how to ripen our fruit. That's a quote that I steal from Christopher Bates that you saw in that first video there. I don't think that New York has a ripeness problem compared to some other cool climate areas. And so, the circulation of the major air masses in the northeastern United States drives warm, often humid summers, milder temperatures in the fall, winter, and spring. And this plant hardiness map that we have up here really does make it clear to see the influence of these unique circumstances that make the wine growing regions more suitable to viticulture, looking at your green areas in the Finger Lakes, down on Long Island being one of the warmest areas, and then the Hudson Valley as well. And so really, really important stuff. Generally the warmest, again, Long Island, generally coldest is the Champlain Valley. Okay. We have 11 American viticultural areas, 7 AVAs and 4 sub-AVAs, and the primary AVAs are listed by the date established on the slide there. Actually, it's funny, I didn't need to make a correction here. Seneca Lake was not until later. Seneca Lake didn't actually come around with its AVA until 2002. However, the TTB website has it wrong, and so that's why my slide is wrong. But we've since caught that, and so Seneca Lake came around in 2002. Cayuga Lake is in the early 80s. Each region has distinct wine grape growing circumstances, including combinations of soil, topography, and climate, which contribute to a distinct regional wine character. Now, the only AVA that is not contained entirely within New York State is Lake Erie, and that's spanning New York, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. Okay, so yes, the Hudson River region was the first AVA in June of 1982. The Finger Lakes followed in September. Cayuga Lake followed in actually 1988. Lake Erie in 83. Long Island in 2001. But the Hamptons and the North Fork actually much earlier in 1985 and 1986. Then you've got in 2002 Seneca Lake, followed by the Niagara Escarpment in 2005, the Champlain Valley in 2016, and the Upper Hudson in 2018. Okay. Great. So early history, Grapes vines grow wild in many places along the east coast of North America. When the Vikings landed in what is now New Brunswick, Canada, in around 1000 BC, they named the area Vinland, right? And much of these grapes, native grapes, were muscadine, which is Vitis rotundifolia. It was from the muscadine variety Scuppernong that North America's first wine was produced in 1562 by French Huguenots in Jacksonville, Florida, of all places. By happenstance, the introduction of Vitis vinifera led to the creation of hybrid grapes, the accidental crossings of Vitis vinifera and native grapes. And Vitis vinifera, could not withstand the climactic rigors and disease pressure of the East Coast. It was also not resistant to the phylloxera root louse. And so when these hybrids came along, they combined disease and pest resistance from North American grapes with some of the better qualities from European grapes. And this is a combination of both native and hybrid varieties, which really allowed for the establishment of vineyards across the United States. Okay, now wines produced from these wild native grape varieties were generally considered overly grapey to acidic, and various attempts to make wines from European grape varieties failed, generally speaking. You'll notice that I'm not using the term foxy to describe these grapes. I hate that term. I hate it so much. We referred to it once in the reference guide, and it's a quote from Dr. Jamie Good, who actually points out that the moniker came because that the foxes, literal foxes, liked to eat the grapes because of their high sugars, and really didn't have anything to do with the smell of a fox. And so for me, I think this is very much local flavor. This is the Concord grape juice and grape jelly that I grew up, enjoying, that we all grew up enjoying. And so, yeah, just, I think that when we talk about these wines, and we'll get into hybrids in a little bit, it's important to just, these are grapes. They're grapes, and they're good grapes, and they make fun wines, and that's how we should really be painting them when we talk about them. Okay, so let's see. Let me jump around a little bit here. Oh, good. Okay, so
Dan, can I just point out the obvious really quick from
Please
the map?
do.
I mean, just to back it up a little bit, I do a lot of webinars, and I think the map of New York State is really powerful. I know that there are many people who know this already on the webinar, but it seems like just looking at this map for a moment and realizing that all of our regions are surrounded by water, or lakes and bodies of water. I know that's such an obvious statement, but it's really profound when you think about where we are and how the water moderates the temperature. And I know we'll get into it when we talk about each region separately, but I think looking at this map, I do a lot of webinars and just kind of focus on the surrounding bodies of water, and people are like, oh wow, that's why there are no vineyards in the Catskill Mountains yet, So I do think it's a powerful vision, and I just wanted to back up for a moment just to touch on that.
100%, and everyone remember that most of the great world's wine regions involve bodies of water, rivers,
right,
lakes, proximity to oceans, Mediterranean Sea. I mean, that we are right there with them, and I always say that, if you look down the eastern coast of the Americas, right, not just North America, we have some of the most terroirs, the most specific terroir for viticulture. I mean, you got to go really far south before you get to get something that's this exciting and unique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great point.
Okay, so Brotherhood Winery, established in 1839 in the Hudson Valley, is the nation's oldest continuously operating winery. They were making sacramental wine during Prohibition. You've got the Pleasant Valley Wine Company, also known as Great Western Winery, one of its leading brands. It's founded in Hammondsport in 1860, and it became Bonded Winery #1. And you can actually go there and see they have a fun kind of wine museum, which is pretty cool. And following the success of Great Western, several other wineries opened in the Finger Lakes, such as Gold Seal Vineyards in 1865, Eagle Crest Vineyards in 1872, and the Taylor Wine Company was established in 1880, Widmer's Wine Cellars in 88. Through the end of the 19th century, these wineries helped put New York on the world's wine-making map. Their sparkling dessert and table wines won major awards, several European competitions, fueling interest and growth. But the New York State wine story and the American wine industry at large. Well, it would be very different today if it were not for what happened next, and that is the 18th Amendment, more commonly known as Prohibition, which banned the production, importation, and transportation and sale of alcoholic beverages from 1920 to 1933. Now, note that they didn't ban the consumption of alcohol. Not surprisingly, these 13 years sent the American wine industry into obscurity for almost half a century. Illegal alcohol activity was rampant during that time. The amendment was repealed on December 5th, 1933, a failed experiment. Following Prohibition, some key players began rebuilding the New York wine industry. In 1933, Charles Fournier left Veuve Clicquot Pont-Sardin in France's Champagne region to join the Urbana Wine Company, Gold Seal, as winemaker. And he's credited with introducing French-American hybrids to New York and was also a supporter of vinifera experimentation in the Finger Lakes. In 1945, the Sands family purchased a winery in Canandaigua. Martin Sands established Canandaigua Industries to run the winery and sold bulk wine to bottlers in the eastern United States. In his first year with just 8 employees, they sold approximately 200,000 gallons. The Canandaigua Wine Company was purchased by E&J Gallo in 2021, still here today. Okay. Moving on into our, what we kind of think of as our modern industry, the 1950s through to today, you know, again, we are young, but we are armed with a rich history. Let's see here. So Dr. Constantine Frank is widely credited with igniting the vinifera revolution. In the 1960s and early 70s, several flagship wineries took root, such as Ben Morrow Wine Company and Cascade Mountain Vineyard in the Hudson Valley, Bully Hill Vineyards and Dr. Constantine Frank Vinifera Wine Cellars in the Finger Lakes. Frank was a Ukrainian immigrant, arrived in the Finger Lakes in the early 1950s and began vinifera experiments, first with the New York State Agricultural Experiment Station, and then with Fournier at Gold Seal. And he released the first vintage from his eponymous brand in 1962. Additionally, you've got German immigrant Hermann J. Wiemer purchased Finger Lakes land in 1973 and started also experimenting with plantings of Vitis vinifera, particularly Riesling, Chardonnay, with much success. Their first vintage was in 1981, and the winery and vine nursery are still in operation today and very important to the American wine industry, particularly the vine nursery. 1973, on Long Island, the Hargrave Vineyard became Long Island's first commercial vineyard and winery, very exciting, hitting the 50th year anniversary for the Long Island wine industry. They planted 2 Vitis vinifera, and Long Island has been traditionally planted to Vitis vinifera ever since. Hybrids and natives are near non-existent. Okay, in 1976, big turning point, the New York Farm Winery Act ushered in a new generation of wineries by significantly lowering the license fee for small producers that were producing less than 50,000 gallons per year. Now, that limit has since been increased to 150,000, but this allowed for an influx of growers to sell wine from their own grapes directly to consumers. Okay. Ben Morrow Wine Company in the Hudson Valley became the state's first farm winery. Followed shortly by Glenora, Wagner, and Hazlitt 1852 in the Finger Lakes and Merritt Estate in Lake Erie. Like these, most of the new wineries were small, family-operated businesses which concentrate on limited production of premium varietal table wines. Typically, the owners of farm wineries oversee the entire process from planting to marketing, and most offer tours and tastings, which helps explain why over 3 million tourists visit New York wineries each year. I think this is another really important point about just kind of the New York State wine industry. There's no big, massive, bulk producers that you have in a lot of these other regions, like, California, Bordeaux, things like that are making just massive, massive amounts of wine. It was Dr. Jamie Good posted an image on his Instagram years ago, and I found it very impactful. It was an aerial shot, like a Google Maps view, and it looked like you guys might find this familiar, like the oil refineries, like off of I-95 in New Jersey, right? Like really just like scorched earth, like really just kind of really massive industry. And it turns out it was a winery in California. And so we don't really do that in New York. And I think that's one of the things that make our products really special. And so, yeah, now, I mean, New York wines are taking their rightful place on the global stage. We're currently exporting into over 30 countries. Okay. Just some great headlines. let me see, I can't actually see them. Here we go. Most important, they highlight the bold open-mindedness of winemakers who are unafraid to move beyond the status quo, those that are planting new grapes, grafting old techniques to new technologies, and applying new understanding of the terroirs, and the results are delicious. That was jamessuckling.com. New York doesn't nearly get the respect it deserves. Eric Asimov couldn't have said it better myself. For sure. And speaking about respect that it does deserve, Fred Merwarth, the owner and winemaker at Herman J. Weimer, was recognized as Wine Enthusiast's Star Wine Awards 2021 International Winemaker of the Year, which is just pretty darn cool. Asimov went on to expand, it's not on the slide, but, he said over the last 20 years, the quality of New York State wine has evolved rapidly, particularly in the Finger Lakes and Long Island. JamesSuckling.com, that article went on to say that the story of each area is quickly becoming much more diverse. There's a growing ensemble of other red, white, and rosé and sparkling wines are beautifully showcasing the region's strengths and the characteristics and capacity to grow great vinifera. And so we are on the up and up, and we should be super proud of it. Cool. Let's keep going. Grapes and production. Fantastic. New York's unique role as one of America's oldest wine regions has left a diverse legacy in its vineyards. Today, New York makes quality wines from more grape varieties than almost any wine region in the world. The Wine Reference Guide profiles 70 different grape varieties that we know are being grown and vinified, and I'm sure there's more that we didn't miss. That we did miss. But experimentation is ripe, pun intended, and a big part of why it's just a really exciting place to make wine. So the charts that you have are showing the changes in acreage planted to each of the grape categories. The second chart removes Concord because 90% of that is used for juice and table grapes. It tends to skew the overall picture of the state. And to note the increase in places with hybrids. Now, it's definitely worth noting that we need updated vineyard data badly. Basically, all the kind of concrete numbers that we're working off of for this 2022 edition of the guide are from 2011. And so, the USDA plotted that data a decade ago. And since we're seeing big changes to the vineyard landscape, it's just hard to kind of quantify specifically without a proper vineyard survey. And so we believe that vineyard plantings like Rieslings, vinifera plantings like Riesling have increased due to the state's excellent reputation. Some wineries are producing new wines from native varieties with stunning results, and hybrids continue to gain back popularity. Considering the effects of climate change, the sustainable grapes could see more of a renaissance in the future. And so, again, number of different varieties grown and vinified in New York State is unlike that of any other region in the world. I had the pleasure of visiting Long Island. This was at the end of 2021. And I mean, within 10 miles, I tasted 2 dozen, 3 dozen different grapes. And some of the ones that I found most exciting were not the ones that are on the tip of everyone's tongue. I fell in love with Melon de Bourgogne, Auxerrois, Malbec, things like that really just stood out. And so that's exciting. That's something for everybody that is, again, something that should be celebrated. Cool. And so, yeah, you see our 35,000 vineyard acres here with our infographic on the left-hand side of the screen. Concord is the state's most widely planted grape variety. It's got over 18,000 acres, but it is mostly sold for juice or table grapes. Catawba is the second most widely planted, leads the white varieties with 1.2 thousand acres. Vinifera, Riesling leads the way with about 1,000 acres, mostly in the Finger Lakes. Chardonnay close second, just shy. I expect that number to be pretty different today. Merlot is our most widely planted European red grape across Long Island and the Finger Lakes mostly. And then Cabernet Franc has about 500 acres across most regions. And I think Cabernet Franc is kind of an unsung grape that really could that unites New York State across at least the three major growing regions with Long Island, the Hudson Valley, and the Finger Lakes as a flagship red variety. I think we're seeing a lot of increased plantings there as well. Okay. Gabrielle, anything you want to add? I'm just rolling along here.
No, I think that's great. I think the diversity is wild at this point in New York State, and it's a strength. I know we'll talk about it a little bit when we get to Long Island, but it's always this this conversation of, does diversity hurt? Is it something that we should be concerned about? Should we stick to something? But ultimately, if you go to the Finger Lakes, of course, Riesling is the top grape, the grape that's really widely respected, and I'm sure you're seeing a lot of in your market in London. But you talk to people and they're talking about different grapes. So I think that that's what's keeping us exciting, what's keeping the trade interested in our region, what's keeping journalists coming back, and predominantly for our direct to consumer model, which most of the wineries have a strong direct to consumer model, that essentially, like, the diversity, in my opinion, is a major positive.
Excellent. Okay, viticulture. Fun. So cold winters, the primary strategy for growing cold tender grape cultivars in New York is the use of spare parts that cold damage can be tolerated. Following the BEV conference a couple weeks ago, I was in the Finger Lakes and took some great images which we're adding to the guide, where we're seeing not just the kind of hilling up that is really important to our vine trunks, but also the kind of growth of additional trunks, additional canes in case of cold winter damage. It's been a pretty mild winter this past year. Although when I was in the Finger Lakes that Sunday, it was 30 degrees Fahrenheit. The following Sunday, someone posted it was 82 degrees Fahrenheit. So climate change isn't necessarily just about getting warmer. It's just wild. It's volatile. And I even saw just someone post, I believe there was a bit of snow or hail this week, which is just absolute chaos. And so, we do have to approach our viticulture in a unique way in order to combat these things. And so for our humid summers, open trellis systems and repeated vineyard maintenance to help with air circulation, managing mildew and disease is also hugely important. Even in what would be considered a lesser vintage, the best wines are the ones that spend all their time in the vineyard. And it's pretty obvious to see that. Leading producers taking more holistic and hands-on approach to vineyard management, reducing reliance on pesticides and herbicides, focusing on the importance of soil health, using non-chemical methods, also really important. Luckily, New York State winemakers, they have this reputation for being quite friendly and sharing hard-won knowledge with their peers. And that continual curiosity and exposure to wines from other regions is also making a big impact. This collaboration, the innovation that goes hand in hand with it, has long been in our New York State DNA. And so, again, because the trunks and buds can be winter injured, the attempt is to provide an excess of both, and then adjust the final crop only after spring growth signals the winter survival. So with that in mind, one or more canes, additional buds will be left, so the final pruning can be adjusted if a frost episode has reduced the number of viable buds, and a full crop may still be achieved. Our humid summers, again, dense canopies restrict airflow, they increase drying time and interfere with spray penetration. And so for varieties that are sensitive to bunch rot, such conditions can spell disaster. Several of our producers, and I'm going to let Gabriella talk about this for sure, but several producers are employing organic and biodynamic practices. Few are currently certified, but again, this vineyard first hands-off approach in the winery is really what's producing some of the best wines in the state. Gabriella, that is some quick and dirty viticulture right there. If there's anything you want to add, please jump in.
I agree. I think there's a major awakening. I'm super excited. I think younger generations are coming in and working in the vineyards and making incredible decisions to, put the climate first, put the earth first, resisting herbicide and coming up with new ways to, the biggest thing for us is really controlling mildew, right? Because of this humid summer. So I think staying on top of that, we work with, for example, the Long Island Wine Council works with Cornell, and there's always something new. Mildew's allegedly been eradicated by powdered algae from the Atlantic coast, right? Like, let's figure this out. I'm extremely energized, and I think that it's positive to see other people slowly trying to figure that out. What can we do in our vineyards that makes the most sense for the health of our soil, the health of our water and the health of our community. So a lot more to touch on there, and I could speak for a very long time, but I really am super excited about the future because there seems to be hope.
Good. We're going into sustainability next, so there might be more opportunity to jump in. Yeah, I mean, good wine, good people. I picked a very kind of broad moniker here, good wine, right? But a big line for us is respect for the drinker and the environment, right? Shouldn't be putting things into wine that we don't want to put into our bodies. Shouldn't be putting things onto the earth that we don't ultimately want in our bodies or in our waterways. And again, when we look at that New York State map and you've got all those bodies of water, they are so important to us. We got to protect them. Right. Sustainability in New York. So this has obviously been a big topic that the Wine and Grape Foundation has done a wonderful job on, and they launched their sustainability program with the mission to advance the environmental, social, and economic sustainability of New York's wine and grape industry. And the vision of that program is to elevate New York State as a world-class wine and grape region that protects the environment, conserves natural resources, and improves the lives of our stakeholders. Achieving sustainability in the wine industry is a worldwide objective as we work to craft a regional sustainability program customized for wine growers in New York. The New York Wine and Grape Foundation has partnered with U.S.-wide and international organizations to set, meet common standards and goals. And some of the objectives that we've defined for sustainable wine growing is to promote the use of practices that reduce reliance on off-farm inputs. Okay. To build, regenerate, and conserve healthy soils for future generations. To protect surrounding reservoirs and waterways from pollution, to improve energy efficiency and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to conserve natural resources, reduce waste streams, and recycle, to encourage healthy ecosystems, biodiversity, and wildlife habitat, to increase climate resiliency and promote climate smart farming, to provide education and pathways for continuous improvement, and to foster a socially equitable and economic viable industry. Sustainability, as I've been working more with the Wine and Grape Foundation on this to produce educational materials and videos and things, it's a tough topic. It's so broad, right? Those 9 tenets that I just read off touch on so many things, and they're all really important. That social equitable and economically viable part is a whole other section that we don't necessarily think about when we talk about sustainable wine growing. But we care about the lives of the people that are there, the people that are in the tasting room and in the vineyards and making the wine, and that's a huge part of it too. And so I think when I speak to producers about this, and the next update for the reference guide will include this. We showed some kind of leading examples of how sustainability is put into true practice, but it's generational growth, right? It's being able to pass this on to your kids' kids and their kids, right? And I think that with the kind of current mindset for consumers, especially young consumers, sustainability is the bare minimum, right? If you're not sustainable, you're just not going to be in business. That's the definition of the word sustainable. And so I think these efforts are just super important, and I hope everybody participates to the best of their ability.
And Dan, I was just going to say it's just more challenging here too. That's the other thing that's really difficult. So
sure.
It's like when you step off a plane, when you travel somewhere and you come back to New York and you get back to New York, and you from London, right? Like you walk out of the airport and you're like, it's so humid. It's kind of hard to breathe, but you don't realize when you're here, and the humidity is a major threat. And it's just not that difficult in other areas of the world. I was talking to the team from Sassicaia, and they started Chakra in Patagonia, right? And Piero says, it's just amazing here. I don't have to spray anything. There's no pressure for any sort of disease, right? So we have a little bit more of a challenge in New York with weather, but I think what's happening now is just that we're becoming more savvy finally. And I would argue that we're going beyond sustainability. We're starting to think regeneration. And I think that that's incredibly powerful and necessary, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I should just clarify, I am not suggesting that the folks are being lazy. It is hard. This is not, I might be making, throwing it out there a little too
No,
light.
no.
It's hard work. It is
Right.
absolutely hard work.
Yeah.
The workbook for the sustainability program is massive. It's got hundreds of points in it that you've got to work through, and it takes time and effort. And yeah, and gosh, I mean, you talk about Patagonia and Argentina, they don't really even have vintage variation. They got very little to worry about down there.
That's the argument, right? There, where's the character, right? How do you, so we have a little character here, but it's probably a lot easier to grow.
No. Okay, so we are moving into our regional profiles of the various AVAs, and along with that, our wine tastings. And so we've got the wines. If you have the wines in front of you, please go ahead and kind of taste through your Niagara wine on your own. We will touch on it absolutely, but just for the sake of time, we're going to move rather quickly, and so we're starting with the Niagara escarpment. Grapes, you have native hybrids and vinifera. We've got 58 farms with 1,100 acres approximately under vine, and an average growing season of about 205 days. Now, it's important when we talk about the Niagara region to understand that the region includes not just the escarpment AVA, it also includes that Lake Plain area that's north of the escarpment, kind of bordered by Lake Ontario at the top. The escarpment itself is the AVA, and that's a limestone ridge. It's running about 650 miles through the region, and the proximity of the ridge to the lake results in a moderate climate. And that 650 miles is going all the way around the Great Lakes into Canada. And so, yeah, I had the pleasure of visiting here. I guess it was also in 2021. Or maybe it was summer 2022, but anyway, it was very exciting to be there. And this image was actually really helpful for me. You have basically your kind of airflow and how specifically Lake Ontario is, and the combination of the escarpment itself, that ridge, is affecting airflow and producing quite favorable vineyard conditions. And so decreased cloud cover, especially in the summers. This area is enjoying more sunshine than most of the northeastern regions. Again, overall result is 205 frost-free days of growing season on average. Less than 5% of winters are reaching temperatures below 10 degrees. Winter vine kill and bud damage from early frosts are largely avoided. And in the spring, the effect of the escarpment is reversed. The sun warms the land and the air rises to settle over the lake. Okay. And here, history wine growing has begun in this region for quite some time before the Civil War. New plantings flourishing in the 1960s, and their commercial winery businesses are really resurging as of the 2000s. And a lot of great land up there, a lot of opportunity up there, and a lot of grapes are working incredibly well. And so additional history, it's believed that a winery that operated at Lockport, New York during the 1860s, you'll see Lockport on the map over here, right on the kind of middle of the escarpment, is where the Niagara grape, which is the Concord and Cassidy crossing, was developed. Niagara regions experienced a great production boom until the 1890s when the market collapsed from overproduction. And the Niagara Grape Company operated from 1879 to 1915 and then ceased operations. The Niagara University Winery was also in production from 1931 to 1944. Okay, and on to our wine. We have the Arrowhead Spring Vineyards 2021 Niagara Escarpment Chardonnay, 11.5% alcohol. Okay, I've got some notes from our producer here. Duncan Ross is the winemaker. He says our estate-grown Chardonnay was blended from oak and stainless steel lots, producing a wine that is smooth and complex with lively acidity, buttery undertones, and without the oak overpowering the fruit. His ingredients, which he lists, which I love, ingredients is just sustainably grown grapes, yeast, malolactic bacteria, and minimal SO2. Okay. In terms of other things to be looking out for, that warming climate, improved growing techniques, they're yielding superb results with vinifera, and most of the new plantings in the region have been vinifera. The region is particularly well suited to the production of age-worthy wines from Pinot Noir, Cabernet Franc, Chardonnay, and Riesling. Okay.
Some really lovely acid here. Maybe it's just because it's the first wine that I've had after my coffee, but like it's just so lively. And I think talking about New York, I mean, that's a major strength across the region. I know it's very obvious, but that acid, something my friend Nick, he's from the UK, but he uses the word sapicity often. And it's just that like wanting to come back to the wine, like kind of craving more, that like kind of like the reason why people put like nuts out at the bar to make you drink more.
Yep.
That sort of like saline, but you know, fresh and kind of crisp, and yeah, the acid's lovely.
Yeah, it's quite, I mean, it quenches your thirst, right? That acid comes in, it gets you overproducing your saliva, and then you want more, which is great. And then look, 11.5% alcohol, Chardonnay, right?
Right.
And there's full fruit characteristic here. There's nothing underripe about it. We're fully fledged into beautiful Chardonnay territory at fairly low alcohol. So yeah, I'm all for it. Very good. Okay, moving right along. Okay, Finger Lakes, here we go. My notes have frozen. Here we are. Here's my face. There we go. Okay. We are now in the Finger Lakes. You've got native grapes, you've got hybrid grapes, you've got Vitis vinifera with plantings of the latter on the rise. Over 400 farms. As of 2021, we were counting 11,000 acres under vine. Our average growing season, about 195 days. And, you know, their reputation precedes themselves. The past 2 decades, the Finger Lakes have become known as one of the finest cool climate wine growing regions, especially for Riesling in North America, and I'd say in the world. We've got some damn good Riesling coming out of there. Damn good, a lot of great wines. And so we're going to talk about those. And so here you've got your 11 lakes, glacier carved, and we're going to go into the terroir now. So, cool climate, yes, but defined by the cold winters, not necessarily the growing season itself. Winters are cold, summers are hot. The proximity to the Great Lakes and the Finger Lakes themselves determines the level of moderating lake effect. Glacial scouring, high-pressure subglacial meltwaters formed a series of gorges, waterfalls, and proglacial lakes. Soils are composed of shale, siltstone, sandstone, and limestone, with vineyards of varying degrees in slope and drainage. I love the photo on the top here. That is of the Watkins Glen State Park, the Gorge Trail there. That's what I think about when I think about Finger Lakes terroir. Right. And it's cool. It's exciting. And then from a climate perspective, if you look at the image in the bottom right-hand corner, I love this satellite image. Love it. I mean, you can see it. It lines right up with that plant hardiness zone map that we saw earlier. You know, you've got those 2 big lakes in the center. They do not freeze over, and they haven't in a very, very, very long time. And that proximity to the Great Lake to the north makes a huge bit of difference too. And so that's where the majority of our viticulture is happening. Let's see what else I got for you here. Yep, I said all that. Good. So in general, the region accumulates heat units later and faster than the more traditional Old World regions. It's a compact season, but a warm and dry September and October are especially beneficial to extend hang time, sometimes long into November. The 10-year rolling average of growing degree days has risen by over 12% in the last 40 years. Okay, so it's a cool fact. Again, that it's changing. It is changing for sure. Okay, what else do we got? I won't go into history yet. We're going to keep talking about geography. Depending on vineyard location, the soils can be well to moderately well drained and vigorous to moderately vigorous. Trellis systems and row orientation have been implemented in response to slope, aspect, and soil vigor. Underlying shale beds provide pathways for vine roots that may also enable water from springs to travel along the ledges. Again, look at that photo in the top there. Those stones are incredibly thin, incredibly soft, incredibly pliable. You can crack them with your fingers, and those roots can really get down in there and search for their water. And there's a lot of water in the area if your vines can get down far enough to find it. Yeah, vineyard location and circumstances can always dictate otherwise, but in general, for Finger Lakes, latitude, north and south row orientation is considered optimal for the region. That's going to provide morning sun exposure on the east side of the lakes and on the trellis, and the afternoon sun on the west side. Given the site-specific nature of the region's vineyards, many top producers are now also focused on the potential of single vineyards and micro sites, and I think that is a wonderful path forward for the Finger Lakes. The site specificity is unique, and the folks that have been doing single vineyard wines, single soil series wines, they're really smart wines, and they do a wonderful job of painting a picture of what the region can do and the potential. Okay. You know what? No, not ready for history yet. We got more. No, I just want to say the big lakes, if you're not familiar, you're not living in this region, they're quite big. We've got the largest is Seneca Lake in the center there. Seneca Lake is 38 miles or 61 kilometers long. Its max width is 3 miles or nearly 5 kilometers long, and its max depth is about 618 feet. It's about 188 meters. Again, this lake does not freeze over and hasn't in over 100 years. And so a huge temperature moderating body. And so the majority of your viticulture is happening on the shores of Seneca Lake, between Cayuga Lake and Keuka Lake on the west side. Okay. Here we go. Finger Lakes history. So in 1860, there was about 3,000 acres of grapes being grown along the shorelines of Keuka, Canandaigua, and Seneca Lakes. Industry expansion continued, reaching up to 50 wineries across 20,000 acres of vineyards by the early 1900s, but was felled by Prohibition. In 1960, the first commercial vinifera vines in New York were produced, including Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Riesling. Going back with our friend Dr. Frank Vinifera Wine Cellars on Keuka Lake, established in 59, first vintage in 62. Lucas Vineyards, established in 1974, became the first winery on Cayuga Lake. In 1977, Glenora Wine Cellars became the first winery on Seneca Lake. And over the last 2 decades, vinifera has seen bigger increases in acreage than hybrids, but both do remain important to the region. So, in 1860, that expansion of the vineyards was fueled by the completion of the Erie Canal. It's established an important trade route linking the Finger Lakes to Albany and New York City via the Hudson River. And you could bring up to 65 tons of grapes on a barge, and those lakes became thoroughfares of trade as a result. Jumping ahead, again, we've got that Pleasant Valley Wine Company was the region's first, won a gold medal at the Vienna Exposition for a sparkling catawba, inspiring growth in the wine cellars through the late 1880s. 1865, Pleasant Valley was producing about 20,000 bottles of sparkling champagne. Walter S. Taylor, grandson of the founder of Walter S. Taylor, grandson of the founder of Taylor Wine Company, now Bully Hill, promoted hybrids. Dr. Constantine Frank, as we know, championed vinifera. And so you had these kind of two opposing approaches to move forward with. Taylor Wine Company, founded in 1880 on Bully Hill and Keuka Lake, and survived Prohibition by producing sacramental wines. The number of growers supplying Taylor grew from a couple of dozen in the 1950s to over 350 by the early 70s. They were very important for the grape growers in the region. And most of that new acreage was French-American hybrids. Yeah, we talked about that. Fantastic. Let's keep going. Anything else, Gabriella? It's a lot.
I'm just tasting the wine. I'm
Okay,
trying
good.
to find the RS. It's nice and balanced.
Let's do
There's
that
some
too.
sugar.
Yeah.
Sorry, skipping ahead.
Yeah, that's okay. And so we have our wine, Boundary Breaks Dry Riesling. This is clone 239. And so Bruce at Boundary Breaks plants specific clones in his blocks. And the 239 refers to the specific clone of Riesling that they planted, thought to possess slightly more acidic characteristic, which lends itself better to a drier style of Riesling. And again, drinking this. Do you want to comment on the wine, Gabriella?
Oh, I think I have the wrong wine. I have a medium dry.
Oh no!
But it's okay. It's love. You know, it's interesting. You have the dry?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I think you have a different clone there too.
I have like 4 different clones.
Okay.
I just Googled. But but it's lovely. I mean, it's nice to compare what sugar can do too. I think also the fascinating thing is this isn't a sweet wine, but there is some RS to balance the low pH and the high acid.
I'm back next week for our Riesling session, and I think that balance between sugar and acid is going to be a huge kind of through line for our discussion. You know, we really need to get this every Riesling is sweet out of people's heads. It's simply not true, and that residual sugar, even in small amounts, is super important to the flavor profile of the wine, unlocking all of that really ripe, fun mid palate, and you're still going to get this beautiful freshness and beautiful acidity that our Rieslings are known for.
And what vintage are you showing?
So
you have the 21.
I've got the 21. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, this particular medium dry is nice and like tropical. Like I think that's another interesting thing. People think, okay, that Riesling from the Finger Lakes is super cool climate, and we're going to think Mosel, or thinking like really sharp, kind of cold. But here, there's just nice generosity of fruit, which is kind of, I guess, counterintuitive to what you would think from a cooler climate. And it's a beautiful point that there's a lot of fruit expression, mango, pineapple, like all these tropical flavors that show character.
Yeah, and it's a sliding scale with those fruit profiles. You know, you're talking more tropical. I'm hanging out like pretty solidly in the stone fruit characteristic with that white peach, a little underripe, tons of citrus on the kind of just the foundation all the way through. It's a lovely wine, and you know, take it or leave it, minerality, right? Which is a tough term, a bit maligned, but yeah, so I definitely
same producer, same grape, and different clones and different pick times can produce such a different array of flavors. It's really interesting.
I got to see Bruce a couple of weeks ago, visited with some other media folks, and he took us into the woods. We went hike essentially, but got to see what he named the winery after, essentially the break in the boundary of his property that looks a lot like that Gorge Trail photo that I showed. And so he's got a special piece of land over there. He's about I'd say about nearly 2/3 up the lake Seneca on the western side, on the right-hand side, is where he's got his vineyards and doing great things. And so Vitis vinifera is the foundation for the economic viability of Finger Lakes wine industry. While the majority of Finger Lakes Rieslings are, so just talking about white wines, while the majority of Finger Lakes Rieslings are fermented with commercial yeast strains with fruit and freshness in mind, there are a number of winery programs that include ambient, uninoculated fermentations, cold soaking, lees aging, and the use of large and older wood formats. The James Suckling article said it pretty well. You know, he said a decade ago there was a reliable sameness to many Finger Lakes Rieslings, but today the picture is infinitely more interesting. Cold soaking, controversial until a few years ago, more skin and lees contact, judicious use of wood. You know, it's all changing the profile of many wines, with particularly their midweight and texture. They've never been this exciting. Right. This is the best time to be drinking New York State wines, particularly from the Finger Lakes, these whites. Additionally to Riesling, it's more than just a Riesling story, you know. Unique unoaked stainless steel fermented Chardonnays, expressing just the purity and freshness of that cool climate fruit, blocking the malolactic fermentation, and then just doing some tank ferment and aging on lees is just, you know, creating just stunning wines that break the norm for what people have in their head for Chardonnay. Right, you know, our Chardonnays are not California Chardonnays; they're different, and they're pretty cool. Textural Pinot Gris, perfumed Gewürztraminer, also quite popular. Dry rosés, particularly prominent from Cabernet Franc, has developed an enthusiastic following as well. Other popular varieties for rosé include Pinot Noir, Blanc Frankish, Saperavi, and more. On the red side, while barrel-aged Cabernet Franc remains the most common, fresh and snappy unoaked Cabernet Franc wines are very well regarded. Pinot Noir also remains a contender and is passionately supported by some dedicated producers. Then there's a whole other, we're not even done. I mean, sparkling wines, hugely important for the Finger Lakes in New York State. And so sparkling wines have been a part of the Finger Lakes wine industry since those early days. And so we've got that history there and tradition there, and that continues today with a lot of success. The methods are going to vary from forced carbonation, Charmant tank method, which could use native and hybrid grapes, all the way through traditional champagne method using Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier. Sparkling Riesling, super exciting, emulating Sekt from Germany. Also growing quickly in production volume, popularity, and renown. Some gorgeous, gorgeous traditional method Rieslings out there, which I'm just in love with. And then lastly, the evolution of those vineyard and cellar techniques is prompting this what we're calling a back to the future like movement for quality hybrids. And Vignoles, Céval, Marshall Foch, Baco Noir, natives such as Catawba are growing in both quality and interest. We are applying better winemaking techniques to these grapes now, and they're super drinkable, and they're exciting, and people are excited about them. Trade is excited about them. There are even some hybrid wines available here in the UK from the Finger Lakes that I'm very proud of, and I love showing them to people because they're super fun. So, anything else you want to add?
Just don't blind taste people in Catawba because it's really mean. It's happened to me. But no,
I'll hit them with some Dacianac
fascinating.
instead. How's that? Good. All right, fantastic. Moving on, we got Lake Erie. Okay, so Lake Erie. Again, this is the AVA that's going to span from New York State into Pennsylvania and Ohio. And we are focusing largely here with Concord grapes. There are small amounts of Labrusca hybrids and vinifera, but you do have several farms, over 300, with about 18,000 acres under vine, with an average growing season of 200 days. The sprawling grape belt includes those vineyards accounting for 54% of the total vineyard acreage in the state. It definitely skews the numbers a little bit, but it's super important to the kind of economics of New York State's wine industry, and the growth and the technology and those improvements that we've seen over the years. Fantastic. Growing areas protected from start of season frosts from the proximity of the cooler lake, and the growing season extended by the growing season is extended by the warmer lake as you enter into the fall. In extremely cold winters, 80% of the lake can freeze over, leaving vineyards exposed to winter damage. Lake Erie is the shallowest of the Great Lakes, and the deepest basin has an average depth of 80 feet. AVA soils are made up of glacial lake beaches and lake bottom sediments. And heavier clay fine soils can be found near the lake shore, and the most favorable gravelly loam soils are about 500 to 800 feet in elevation, extending up to 10 feet deep. So you've got sheltered, the region is sheltered to the northwest by the effective Great Lakes Superior and Huron. And data from the Lake Erie Regional Grape Program is showing the annual growing degree days averaging about 3,000. And so temperature effects of regional impact is kind of diminishing as you increase the distance from the lakes and climb higher onto the slopes of the plateau. The closer you are to the lake, the better. And the AVA is composed of sediment from a series of proglacial lakes from the last ice age, consisting of upper Devonian shales and sandstones. Higher elevation sites are well drained over the permanent water zone below. Okay, some fun history here. 1818, you've got the first vineyard, and then these vines were natives, but they were eventually replaced with Isabella and Catawba in 1824. I think this is great. The British American physician and dentist Thomas Bramwell Welch was a keen supporter of the dry movement. He was the producer of Dr. Welch's unfermented wine, which became Welch's grape juice. And it was a big this region, cranking out grape juice for non-wine consumption was a big part of how Prohibition kind of came around. And then we've got some wineries coming back in the late 1960s and 1970s. Johnson Vineyards Winery plants French American hybrids, and the first vinifera wine, Chardonnay, was produced in 1972. New York's land grant universities have long been centered. Excuse me, it's a lot of talking, guys. I'm not gonna lie. Okay. New York's land grant universities have long been centers of excellence for agriculture, science, and engineering. In 2009, as part of the Cornell Cooperative Extension Program, the Lake Erie Research and Extension Laboratory opened with the goal of maintaining a strong grape industry across the 3 western counties. Can't undersell the importance of Cornell's extension programs across our regions. Huge partner in our industry. And so I just wanted to, it's a good opportunity to give them a shout. Okay. On to our wine. We have the Mazza Chautauqua Cellars Gewürztraminer. This is a 2017 with 12% ABV. Turns out, you wouldn't know it from the website, but this is Finger Lakes fruit. Didn't quite expect that when I chose this wine, but there is Gewürztraminer planted there as well, and depending on your vintage will determine kind of if you end up using it or not. But this one was produced in the Finger Lakes. This one was grown in the Finger Lakes by Martini Vineyards. Yeah, the 2017 grapes had extended skin contact prior to pressing to extract the spicy characters from the skin, and it is cool fermented to retain varietal aroma and delicate character. Spicy floral aromas and flavors complement a semi-dry finish. Try a little bit.
I didn't get this one, so I can't taste with you, but I'm picturing it in my head. I'm tasting it in my head.
And Mazza makes great wine. I've had their rosés that they use hybrids for, and there are, you know, these very high aromatic white wines being produced there in Lake Erie, and so it was a good idea in theory.
It's funny from a consumer perspective. I think Jen can probably tell us, but I believe a Gewürztraminer won the New York Wine and Grape Classic last year, or maybe the year before. And it's sort of that obvious character that people crave, especially consumers, that, oh, wow, I'm tasting something different. That's not Chardonnay. That's not, you know, Sauvignon Blanc. And I think there is consumer demand for these aromatic grapes for sure.
You are correct, Gabriella.
Thanks, Jen.
Pindar won with their Gewürztraminer.
A Gewürz. Yeah.
That's a great wine too. I love Gewürztraminer. I think I credit the aromatics of this grape as being one of the reasons that I got into wine in the first place. I just put my nose in the glass and I was like, holy cow, this is wild. And so what I like is I like Gewürztraminer that is unabashedly Gewürztraminer, right? It doesn't have to be like, you know, heavy and cloying. I don't want it to be so super perfumed that you can't have more than a glass, but when you get a dry style or even a slightly off dry style that is both aromatically exotic and also, you know, gives you that acidity that you require, I think it's epic. And as a guy who's got a background in cheese, man, what a cheese wine, right? And you could pair this with some of the funkiest, stinkiest, gnarliest cheeses out there, and it's a special combination. It really is. So I'm happy to have this one. Again, Lake Erie Concord accounting for 86.5% of the total vineyard acres planted along the lake. However, hybrid and vinifera varieties are produced there by several quality-focused producers. Excellent.
All right.
I'm gonna sit back and
drink, enjoy the Gewürz. I'll talk a little bit about Long Island, and Dan was just here, so would love his perspective as well. But as Dan mentioned, we're in the hurricane path. Like, weather in New York State is a big challenge, and I think what I always try to get the point across of vintage variation. We protrude out. We're an island that's 118 miles long, 23 miles at the fattest point, at the widest point, and ultimately surrounded by water. I was talking to someone who works at the Weather Channel, where I was complaining about how inaccurate our weather has been over the years, especially during harvest. The radar could be clear, and then all of a sudden you get a rain shower. So they are working on better tracking, which I think is going to be incredibly important for us. But it is overall really hard just because of the shape and where we are. We're in a gorgeous area. There's fishing, there's farming, there are beautiful vegetable farms. Every day I feel like I hear of a new oyster company that's starting. So it's really truly that sort of heart, the localism, I think, on Long Island is taking a really major role, and people are finally realizing that the quality, I think, in overall New York State, sort of like the theme of this webinar is that the quality is there, and people really need to start supporting. growing season, yes, as Dan mentioned, we have one of the warmest sites in New York State. But that being said, I mean, for us personally as a producer, it's been a challenge over the years to ripen Cabernet Sauvignon, for example. And so you get to October and it starts raining and the bricks sort of flatline, the canopy shuts down, and you're left with, 20 bricks of Cab Sauv, which is not pleasant. But with that said, there's massive volatility because of climate change, I think is good and bad for us personally, primarily bad, but good last year. We had an incredible 22 vintage, where I can tell you that we in barrel behind me and in this room are some of the best reds we've ever made. And it was, primarily because we can ripen those red grapes. You're getting those deep, beautiful, dark colors, concentration, tons of complexity, a lot of nuance because of the fact that the grapes ripened. So I think this point here is just like, yes, major experimentation, a ton of different grapes planted. There's everything from pet nat to traditional method to dry whites to whites with a touch of sweetness, dry rosé, light-bodied reds, dark rosés, and when we can make those Bordeaux style, those sort of age-worthy, right bank sort of blends, we're going for it and we're making them, and the wines are aging so well in the cellar. And I think that's kind of another point to talk about with New York is like, we really don't know. We are a young region, a young state, and we have no clue what will happen with age. Someone was just telling me that they had a Hargrave from the 70s, and I was dying. I was like, I would love to taste that wine just to see what could happen. So the experimentation, I think, can be tricky. I wrote here, diversity is our strength, just because that's the angle I'm taking because of basically what my grandfather planted behind me in the vineyard. We went for Merlot, Cab Franc, Cab Sauv, Malbec, Petit Verdot, and then, oh, well, Pinot sounds interesting, and Syrah sounds interesting, and Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay. What about Viognier? So the diversity was there, I think, just because of the sheer kind of interest of the founders of the region. And now it's our strength because of the consumer demand. 2 hours from New York City, an hour and 50 minutes if you drive the way I do. And honestly, there's massive agro-tourism that supports what we do, which is incredibly powerful. The consumer demand really drives direct to consumer and wine club retention, right? So if there's a little bit of something for everyone. But I do love the fact, I guess we can go to the next slide at this point, but the fact that, we're tasting a Merlot today, right? Because of the fact that it's something that not everyone is thinking about when they think of Long Island, or they were, and maybe they weren't, they haven't been, but the wine really stands out. So again, winter temperatures are milder. I think this point here about the North and the South Fork is interesting. I read all these WSET textbooks. Someone asked me to help edit the WSET textbook, and there was this massive detailed paragraph about the difference between the North and the South Fork. And I truly feel like yes, of course, the South Fork is different, but you're really seeing the majority of the wineries on the North Fork. There's a few 100% South Fork fruit wines, but yeah, way cooler because of the ocean. But ultimately, that ocean influence is right in our backyard as the North Fork as well. The point that I would make that's really powerful is our soil. Massive draining potential. It poured. My dogs were so scared. It poured here, thunder on Sunday, and woke up the next day, drove in the vineyard, and nothing, no puddles, no, did not see any sign of water. And it's because the soils are so well draining because of the sandy aspect. The glacier formed Long Island clearly, and I think the beauty of what that did is the glacier left these kettle holes around the North and the South Fork, So the kettle holes are essentially ponds. And this is my new thing. The new thing that I'm talking about is just the biodiversity within the regions because of these kettle holes. So for example, we have 3 or 4 ponds on the property. We've seen over 200 species of birds in the past year. We're bird nerds, but I think that really speaks to the biodiversity of New York State and of Long Island. The basically like everything from your breeding bald eagles in your corner, in your vineyard. The ospreys just arrived, and then like on the sand bluffs, there are bank swallows that are basically extinct, and you can see these bank swallows right in your backyard. And I really truly believe that creates a lot of energy for vine growth. But overall, super exciting time. I agree with Dan. The wines have never been better. And we are all small, mostly family-owned wineries here. A lot of 2nd and 3rd generation. A lot of work because we manage a ton of consumer traffic. Even in the winter now it's happening, which is mind-blowing. But I think that, yeah, the history that we have starting in 73, it's really not that long ago. Alex and Louisa Hargrave met at Harvard. They were obsessed with Bordeaux, and Bordeaux in the 60s and the 70s was outstanding and linear and fresh, and some of the best vintages came from those years. And they wanted to sort of replicate or work within that taste profile when they were planting their vineyard. So the story goes that they traveled to California and tasted the wines there and felt like they were too ripe. They weren't comparable to Bordeaux, to Oregon. They went to Virginia. And then after soil and climate studies, compared where we are to the growing region and the climate in Bordeaux. And yes, at this point, we're different. I wouldn't compare us. I think there's a lot more fruit and ripeness and alcohol at this moment in Bordeaux, which is what they're struggling with, right? So a lot of producers, Pomerol is like one of the hottest places in France, right? It's nuts. And so they're struggling with this heat. And here we are, extremely balanced, surrounded by water. Cornell, incredible, you already mentioned them, mind-blowing research, really happy that they're around the corner. The sustainable wine growing certification growing, premiums outstanding. I think, they were a major, I love that you put this on here, major game changer, allowing everything from, a larger producer, but really like the small mom and pop producers to make their own label, which is extremely important because at this point, the barrier to entry on Long Island is extremely challenging because of the real estate market. It's another point to bring up that the Hamptons real estate market is mind-blowing, and the cost of land out here is incredible. And here we are with the 2019 Merlot. I have this like love-hate relationship with Merlot. I get to the point where I feel like, why are we making this? Let's just make blends. Let's just, let's work with Cabernet Franc and Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot and blend, and the sum is greater than the parts. And then I taste an old Merlot and I say, okay, forget it. This is stunning. So it's, for me, a grape that takes some time, right? It's really interesting. The 22 is beautiful in barrel right now, but I know it'll go into like a little bit of a hibernation period. And then once it starts developing a little, and I don't think this has tertiary components yet, but once it starts developing a little bit of that tertiary kind of like savory, less obvious, punchy fruit, it becomes lovely. And the acid and everything's super balanced. And, we opened a 2005 Merlot the other day and poured it blind for someone, and they were really excited. So I do think I'm really happy that you picked this wine specifically.
Yeah, I think it is drinking great. I agree with you. I think what I'm getting really is really vivid cherry, just like it is I could see it, right? And that's really fun. That kind of that focus is really nice. And then in terms of savory notes, it's not so much this earthiness yet, but it's just little flecks of kind of green herbs, which I'm really enjoying too. I think it's a great wine. Yeah.
I think most people would say, okay, Cabernet Franc is what we're known for at this point. It's shifted a little bit, but there is such diversity in winemaking among Cabernet Franc producers that at this point, like the Merlot, the style of the Merlot being mostly neutral oak, maybe a little bit, this is neutral, maybe a little bit of new oak here and there, medium body, very plush red fruit, has become a bit more reliable, if that makes sense, in my opinion, and age worthy. Like I love Lens. I think what they're doing is outstanding with Merlot, their old wine. I mean, you can really lay these wines down, and that to me is a sign of a quality region.
For sure. Yeah, I had the pleasure of being out there just a couple of weeks ago. I got to meet Louisa Hargrave, which was great, and interview her. I'm excited to share that footage as part of the 50th anniversary celebration later this summer. I should have it by early summer, I hope, edited. And then just going around the region, it's a great it's a great time to be drinking wine on Long Island. It really is. Yeah. I will admit, so I am Long Island born and raised. I grew up out in Port Jeff, but I didn't really come back to Long Island with a serious wine approach until very recently, really. And it was when you and I met for the first time with Len Thompson. I kind of went to Len and I said, listen, I think that everything's over oaked.
Oh yeah.
Right. You know, this is now like, this is like early 2010s. I'm talking, this was my perception before, you know, I got it really involved in wine before I moved to the UK. And I said to Len, Len Thompson, I said, prove me wrong. Right. And he planned a day and a half of tasting for us. And he did. And I think, you know, it's one of the reasons, like I've put in very bold text here, you know, like the over oak styles of yesteryear are not what we're doing anymore yet. You know, we have this Merlot, it's balanced, it's 13.6% alcohol. I mean, I wish all my red wines were 13.6% alcohol, because those big ones are just, they're big, right? And these regions, California, Bordeaux, they're just getting bigger. And I feel like Long Island's really just hitting its stride in terms of balance. And I'm really, really excited about it. And again, you know, the grapes that I got excited about when I was out there were grapes that aren't even on anyone's radar yet, like Melon de Bourgogne. Like that's Hampton's Muscadet. Like, take my money. Like, it's great.
Right. And I think too,
I mean, you know, it goes on and on.
You know, people also like have recipes in past years. They're like, okay, I order 10 new barrels every year. I order 15 new barrels every year. And at this point, there's such massive vintage variation. 18, I mean, it just rained. We didn't make any red wine here in the cellar. I sold it all as bulk. And at the end of the day, like you have to adjust to the vintage. So 22, we called all of our barrel makers. We had a great vintage. Sure, the wine can hold it. The wine's a little bit more concentrated. There's more structure. The wine can hold a little bit more new oak, but just having a recipe and just putting everything in 100% or 80% every year, just because that's what you do, just doesn't work anymore, because you're really hiding the beauty of Long Island, which is the fruit. And I think people have absolutely realized that.
Well, Gabriella, I think I speak for everyone where I could continue to chat.
Sorry.
With you. No,
I could also talk forever. Believe
me, you are not the long-winded one here. It is my fault, but
let's go to the Hudson River.
I'm watching our clock, but again, the rosés on Long Island, the sparkling wines on Long Island cannot be, undersold either. I mean, you've got some rosé specialists that are cranking out some gorgeous, really fun wines, and the same thing on the sparkling side. And so I wish we could spend more, and we will, because I think in about 6-7 weeks, I have a whole Long Island session coming up. So very, very exciting. We are going to keep cruising along, and I'm going to go quickly, so I apologize. It is not for lack of interest in our remaining regions, but we've got the Hudson River region. Okay, you've got hybrids in Vitis vinifera. We've got about 500 acres under vine, average growing season of 190 days approximately, and it's one of the oldest and most historically important wine areas in the United States. The Hudson River Valley can be credited for pioneering many of the innovations that helped the New York wine industry grow. Its proximity to New York City, hugely important to its development, and it's a special place. And so we've got the climate of the New York Hudson Valley, generally representative of humid climates in the northeastern United States, but that topography plays a large role. It leads to a wide range of microclimates. Humidity and precipitation is somewhat higher than surrounding areas, but a worthy trade-off for warmer nights and a less extreme annual temperature range. You've got a lot of different soil types, as we discussed. It crosses into a lot of those different soil provinces. And so along the river, Palisades are of metamorphic basalt. The highlands are primarily granite and gneiss. And from Beacon to Albany, shales and limestones. We've got some very diverse alluvial soils. The Hudson River brings ocean water really far north, way farther north than you'd think ocean water is making it up there. The tide is pretty fierce. I was in Beacon, New York for a couple of days very recently. We took a ferry across to get some tacos, and man, that river was rocking. It's quite cool. In the video that we started the presentation with, that pan shot of the kind of big waterway, that's the Hudson River. I walked across a bridge to get that shot, and it's quite intense. And so on average, the summer rainfalls kind of in July are a little heavier in the rest of the state, but they're really reduced in September and October, which is again critical for maturing months compared to the other grape growing regions. Summer temperatures are high with warm southerly winds, and the average low temperature about 21 degrees northerly winds out of Canada. And so it does kind of restrict the region to primarily cold hardy varieties, but we're seeing a lot of success with a lot of different grapes. And you're pretty much kind of stacked with mountain ranges on all sides, which is great. Okay, we've got wine produced in the Hudson Valley for at least 3 centuries. In the mid-1800s, horticulturists and grape breeders played a significant role in the development of new grape varieties and pruning systems. As we discussed, 1976, Ben Marl became the first newly licensed New York farm winery, and they operate one of the oldest continuously farmed vineyards in America. That site has been used since the 1700s. In 2016, the Hudson Valley Cabernet Franc Coalition was formed. There are over 59 wineries in the Hudson Valley. And a lot of experimentation here. Early kind of 1600s or late 1600s rather, we have failed attempts with vinifera, Oxford diseases, and so native and hybrids became the mainstays. And then we also have Brotherhood, which we mentioned, was founded in 1839, is oldest continuously operating winery. And so crossing Vitis vinifera with native varieties, their experiments produced grapes that in turn eventually led to such notable varieties as Diamond and Cayuga White. They developed pruning systems that are in use today, such as 2- and 4-arm Niffen, and that was developed in response to the vigor of these new varieties while providing canopy structures that would ripen the fruit. And from quality to output, talent and technology, this is a region to watch. And so we've got the Ben Marl Estate Cabernet Franc. This is the 2020 vintage, 2017. It spends about minimum of 9 months, depending on the vintage, in 3 to 4 year old French oak. Really quite balanced. It's got a great sticker for the Hudson Valley Cabernet Franc Coalition on there, which is great. I think it's really wonderful to see producers kind of combining strengths to market, a grape variety that they're really passionate about. And Matt Spaccarelli, the winemaker here, is a good friend. It's a good wine. We showed this in London to some trade folk in end of January. This wine was very well received.
I just had this wine a couple weeks ago. I don't have it in front of me, but I love what Matt's doing. He's extremely obsessed with clones and sites, and I think he's taking Cab Franc to another level, which is extremely exciting.
Yeah, really smart guy. He's going to feature in a Hudson Valley video that we'll produce later this year. Really excited to have become friends with him and Casey, who they have Fjord Vineyard as well. They're just the best. And so,
what was that photo on the other slide? What were they signing on the photo?
Oh, so that was the Farm Winery Act in '76. Yep. So that's
got it.
Yeah.
That's a very serious photo.
Yep, it looks it, right?
Okay.
Except for the guy on the right hand side. Everybody else. Apologies if that's someone's relative. It probably is. Okay.
Wow. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, again, crucible for development of French American hybrids. It's vinifera that we're seeing increased plantings of, and then we've got serious viticultural wine growing with heirloom varieties, varieties developed in the region between 1840 and 1890. And this nod to our history aligns with regional culinary trends that emphasize locally grown food and wine. Okay, so we're just about at time, but we do have the Upper Hudson. Upper Hudson sits north of Albany and spreads to the east and west up past Saratoga Springs. The grapes here are largely hybrids, the coldest, coolest, hardy hybrids. This is New York's newest AVA, established in 2018. It's mountainous surroundings with Adirondacks, Catskills, and the guys over in Vermont and Massachusetts, creating unique mesoclimates suitable for cool climate viticulture. The wine we chose was the Blue Jay Dacianac. It's a non-vintage wine, 13% alcohol. And again, that's Upper Hudson regions focusing mostly on cold, hardy hybrids, including Marquette, Frontenac, La Crescent, and La Crosse. While often referred to as French American, it's a good reminder that most of these are actually the result of North American breeding programs from the University of Minnesota and Cornell. And so I do have just a quick note on Dacianac. It's known to be early ripening. This is a French American hybrid. It's a red with very vigorous growth and good resistance to powdery mildew and downy mildew. So less sprays, all good stuff. A visit to this region would yield an exciting foray into the world of hybrid viticulture. I do hope to get to spend some time there with the producers at some point. Okay. Last but not least, the Champlain Valley. We're in the coldest of the cold now, all the way up the top. We've got hybrids, we've got natives, and we've got small plantings of vinifera, 21 farms, a little over 100 acres under vine, and a growing season of 160 days. Champlain Valley of New York is recognizing the cool climate and short growing season. Owing to the physiography of the relatively flat valley and surrounding mountains, it lies entirely within the Champagne lowlands. You've had some wine being produced from the French settlers in the Champlain Valley, but imported most of their wine from France. It wasn't until the 1970s farmers in the regions began to experiment with grape growing in earnest. By the 1990s, breakthroughs in viticulture developed high-quality disease-resistant grapes that could thrive in this climate. And the AVA was established in 2016, and more of the landscape in the valley is being dedicated to vineyards and cideries, which is great. The wine we chose for this one is the Diamond from Vesco Ridge Vineyards. This is another non-vintage wine. Diamond is a cross of Concord and Iona, which was developed in 1855. It's a versatile white variety used to make both still and sparkling wines in both dry and sweet styles. This is another one where you want to talk about winemaking on a knife edge, and in the world of hybrid viticulture, this is the place for you. And so we've got the wine here, 12% ABV, pretty good. All right, so before this is I'm not even gonna go there yet. I'm not gonna say thank you yet because I just have one more little bit. The value proposition for New York State is something that we can't not mention. There's incredible value here. We can boast a wide breadth of styles and varieties with the signature of a cool class growing region, fresh, lively wines with moderate alcohol, lots of flavor, and compared to established regions on the U.S. West Coast, our wines are budget friendly to the average consumer, with the overwhelming majority of producers being small and family owned. As I mentioned earlier, you're getting an artisan product rooted in fascinating terroir. Okay, if you're out there selling New York State wine, that's what we're selling. We're selling an artisan product that's rooted in fascinating terroir. We've got great history and a real adventurous spirit when it comes to experimentation, and we're super excited about our future. And so I've got just a few bullet points just to drive it home, and then I'll let you guys go until next week. We are undoubtedly cool climate, but we've proven that we know how to ripen our fruit. We have terroir-driven freshness with moderate alcohol. It's making New York State wines very food friendly. This is a huge part of New York State wine that I didn't get to include just because of time in today's presentation. These wines are great with food. They're so much fun. They've got this acidity. They've got moderate alcohol levels, and it all comes together to be just, they work on the beach, they work on the boat, they work on the lake, they work with, just about anything, which is something that not all wine regions can boast. Young, but a rich history. And we're going to continue to advance the success of our flagship varieties: Riesling, Cabernet Franc, Chardonnay, sparkling wines for sure. But again, that experimentation is wildly important to our industry. We're making a lot of great wine from a lot of great grapes. And, it's also, we didn't really get to talk enough about the people either. And, from the manifesto for the New York Wine and Grape Foundation, when they rebranded to Boldly New York, we're an intrepid band of talented outsiders, but we've come together over a shared vision for excellence. Together, we embrace our diversity as a community of locals and expats alike, and we've set our sights on the world stage. And I like that. I have been embraced by the New York State wine community, and I'm so wonderfully honored to call some of them my friends. Misty. With such incredible diversity, it would be a fool's errand to pack New York State wine industry into a tidy little box. I tried with the guide, I failed, but we've got 90 pages of awesome information, and we are so much more than the sum of our parts. And so thank you so much for listening to us. Gabriella, thank you so very much for joining me this morning, and I'll be back next week, guys. We're doing Riesling. Looking forward to it.
Thank you for your facts, Dan. Awesome energy.